something interesting is sure to happen. Well, I think you ought to tell me who you are first. Mr. Rabbit? Then why did you ask the question?
Goodness, this is quite extraordinary.
Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?
But today is turning into the most curious adventure I have ever had.
A big warm welcome to our listeners again. I'm Georgia Alice, and thank you for joining me as we tumble down yet another rabbit hole together. And I can't wait to get curious with today's guest, Amy Livingstone. So Amy is the founder of Resilient One, and that's an organisation that's dedicated to helping corporates navigate 21st century change and also the chaos and the crisis that we're experiencing. She is an educator, leader and resilience builder, and has coached boards, business owners and executives. She has experience in senior leadership in financial services, business advisory, and she's actually helped people with their native title owners in Cape York. She's helped not-for-profits through being on their boards, restructuring and looking at their strategic governance. She's also a member of the Australian Institute of Directors. Now, aside from all that business stuff, as she runs her own business as well, she's a certified heart math mentor, a certified meditation facilitator, and a highly sought after yoga instructor. So let's get curious. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you, Georgia. Wow. I'm kind of sitting here thinking that's a fair amount to pack into life. So
far, yeah. And look, and you're not even halfway through your life, I don't think so.
Well, 43 this year. So, yeah, I guess kind of coming up to the halfway mark and feeling really grateful at all the opportunity I've had to not only help and support individuals and organisations, but also to explore for myself my own personal development path and build resilience personally through my experiences, be that illness, challenge, adversity, and also the different aspects of corporate life and business that I've been involved in.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. So I have a question that I ask all of my guests, and I'm going to start off with this question for you. I don't know if you've heard the podcast before. I'm going to dive right in. So I want you to imagine that I am a 7-year-old Alice skipping my way through Wonderland, and I bump into Amy. And I say to Amy, well, Amy, who are you? What do you do in this world? How would you answer what you do and your purpose to a 7-year-old girl?
Oh, well, I love that description. And I would imagine or visualize myself also explaining this to my nephew or my niece. One who is 7 and the other one is 5. And I like to keep it quite simple in that situation where, for me, my purpose that has become clearer and clearer, or should I say more refined as I've moved through the last probably about 5 years, is to support this whole world to achieve a place of peace and harmony, but on a personal level, supporting people to reconnect with the source of themselves and to live their best life through understanding and embracing their purpose.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that you say they connect to the source of themselves. That could be an entire podcast episode just talking about that. So yeah, beautiful work. Now for those, I'm going to be completely transparent. Amy and I met, I don't even know what year it was, but we were in Sydney. I was in Sydney running a workshop and you were a participant there in that workshop. It was, I think it was Women in financial services leadership
2016.
program. Yeah.
2016.
2016 it was. There you go. You've got a
Yes.
good memory.
There you
So,
go.
and then we sort of stayed connected, and I've really been intrigued and inspired by the work that you do. And there's so many different facets to what you do. And I think you've got a lot of value to add, not just for people in the times that we're experiencing right now. So we're, recording this about, I don't know, 2 to 3 months into COVID here in Australia. So I think there's a lot that you can offer, but just not in this time. So can you share with us what your description of resilience would be? So how would somebody know that they are resilient?
Look, that's a fantastic question or area to explore. It's like a whole nother area, like connecting to the source of who we are. And there's many different views or translations of the concept of resilience, as I'm sure you're aware, and whoever's listening will probably have their own way that resilience resonates. For me, it's really the capacity that we have as individuals to recover from, adapt, and sustain ourselves during challenge, stress, and adversity. I also have very much a well-being or health and wellness lens on it, though, in the sense that without that optimal state of well-being, whatever resilience we attempt to cultivate or wish to build perhaps doesn't actually reach that peak performance level that we wish to see or we wish to realize.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned both optimal performance and peak performance. From my point of view, I think that's and you've just said it, they're two different things. So optimal performance is resilience in a nutshell. Let me just confirm this and butt in if you think I'm going off track. So optimal performance is your ability to bounce back and be able to match your state, like the state that you're in, to the task at hand. So I should be able to use certain tools or whatever it is to be able to take on whatever life is throwing at me. Peak performance, I think shorter bursts of really being in flow, being in the moment. You can live a life of flow, which is continual, but sometimes you can actually go to a higher level of peak performance, but they're generally shorter bursts. This is my thoughts. Optimal resilience and optimal performance allows you to really flow and navigate life continually. Does that sound around about right, or anything you want to add there?
I really do resonate with that, and I feel that we're on the same page here, Georgia. Peak performance in itself, the word peak is a mountain peak. So those, I guess, areas or times where we are really setting our sights on a particular mountain peak, to use that as a metaphor. That mountain peak could be a number of things. It could be our personal development. It could be our spiritual development. It could be our emotional intelligence. It could be an actual material goal that we want to achieve this outcome in a job, or be able to see ourselves leading a team in this company, or potentially even just raise the bar of what we're doing currently. I feel that peak performance term that you're hinting at there is definitely in that frame of reference. The optimal performance, I like to think of more as, and I talk to my clients around this, and that is, it's moment by moment streaming of presence. So it's continual, it's continuous. There is no point of breaking that. What we want to do is cultivate this optimal performance or optimal state of well-being that enables us to be in that moment by moment streaming of presence, and that is continual flow.
Yeah, beautiful.
That is when flow becomes life, as you know.
Yeah, I read something the other day that really resonated with me, and it resonates now with what you're saying. I'm trying to think of where I read it. I think it may have been something that Jamie Wheel from the Flow Genome Project had actually put out on a social media post, I think. But they were talking about flow. And one of the things they said is that some people will be in you know, these constant states of flow, like what you're saying, like continually presence. And they can't really explain how they're in it, but they know the only reason they know they're in it is when they get knocked out of it. Like they're living a life of flow, but they know, oh, I've been knocked out of it. And then they know the tools and the steps to take to get back into that conscious present living. And when he said that, I went, oh, that so resonates. Because I've had people, you know, give me feedback that you sort of live your life in flow all the time. I said, yeah, but I do get knocked out every now and then. And that sort of really resonated. So what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, look, I from what you were describing there, and I mean, I'm a big fan of Jamie Wheel, and I do have to shout out that you brought me back a book called Stealing Fire that he was involved with, and yeah, very inspirational, amazing body of work there. And I know that you follow and work with Jamie as well, so that's exciting to see that development for you. Just thinking that through. Really, it's a transformational practice, and I use the word practice because it's like you're pointing out, it's not a destination. Flow is not a destination. It is actually what you do on the way, every moment of that way. And it is that actual embodiment of it that gives us that moment by moment streaming of presence. And you're right, life, you know, and all that we experience does take us off center. Really, it brings me back to so much of the ancient yogi and sages' philosophy around, you know, come back. It's not about when you get knocked off and staying in that maybe sense of, oh, I didn't make it that long in my flow today or this year or this month or whatever time frame we're measuring it by. Just acknowledging that I'm in my body-mind complex as a vehicle. Yes, I can come off course, but I can steer myself back on. And the more often I do that, just like in meditation, where I come back to the breath from the thought, from the mind racing, that begins to build the neurological patterning, not just in the intercellular matrix, but also energetically and into the subtle body. So then that becomes a faster and quicker process every time.
Yeah, you're building a muscle, a resilience muscle, to be able to bounce back.
Absolutely. It's pretty phenomenal. And when we can actually embed that into our subtle paradigms, not just our mental and our physical paradigms, then it almost happens without us needing to think about it. Just like when you're experienced with meditation, you know, that coming back to your breath just happens because you've rewired yourself.
Yeah, beautiful. So question for you, which is really intriguing for most people, they want to understand, well, how does someone like Amy get into the line of work that she does? So what's the backstory? How did you get to where you are today? What led you to be, you know, being at the helm of Resilient One, you know, helping organizations, corporations to build more resilience, and yoga, sound meditation, heart math? Like there's so many things, so many feathers in your cap. What led you to, if you can shorten it, you're probably taking them to asking you to share your whole life here in a podcast. But what do you think the key sort of events that led you to where you are?
Okay. Well, I would say it's almost a quarter of a century. So I'll do my best to condense all of that. To be honest, it really came from that personal, that constant, even from a child, that personal desire to seek out the meaning, the purpose, not just for my life and what I do and you know, how I live my life, but the meaning and the purpose behind human existence, behind you know, all the structures that we create as humans. So that curious mind, I think, is what really has driven me to not just make the most of those opportunities, but also to dive into opportunities perhaps that, you know, may not always seem aligned at the time, but ultimately were important, I felt, for my emotional, spiritual, as well as intellectual development throughout my career and all the facets of that. And we can only really help anyone else from the experiences that we have and draw on within ourselves. So for me, it was really about embracing everything that was there in order to better understand myself, but also better help. So yeah, kind of a dual facet for me.
So a little bit of curiosity. Were there any key turning points that you think were the biggest learnings for you that really helped you determine potentially a path?
Yeah, I would say that the aspect of spiritual development was very strong for me from my family. My father taught us to meditate as children, and I didn't realize that's what it was at the time. And then later on, going to meditation classes, like, oh, we used to do this with Dad. Okay, that's what he was getting us to do. But yeah, having very much a focus of spiritual development in childhood, and also creative development and artistic development, led me very early into exploring creativity, and also establishing a yoga and meditation practice very early in my life. And I always felt personally that it would be something I would facilitate at some point. It was just an inherent knowing. I had that, I guess, knowing that I would also teach and mentor and facilitate as well, that it was a natural space for me to help others in. From the aspect of really wanting everyone to embrace their own abilities, which are infinite, and the potential of who they are, because I believe that I had that for myself. And it wasn't until probably after university that I jumped into the, really intellectual frame of business and commerce, and I enjoyed that as well. But there came a turning point from that period of business and commerce and leadership into, I guess, returning back to the spiritual development as a way to anchor myself and reframe my understanding of what my purpose is for this life, which, came with some hard learnings around my own well-being and health, and what really were my intrinsic values that I will not compromise on, that I had allowed to slip a little, and I had diluted over.
Is there anything specific you could share that you feel comfortable sharing around some of the values and the things that you had diluted and the consequences of doing that?
Yeah, sure. From the wellbeing space, which I kind of touched on, I might share that in the, I guess, pace of constantly being promoted through corporate, managing different environments and teams and personalities, and different business and stakeholder expectations, I found that there was, not always that level of alignment that I would desire from a values and behavioural perspective, and that in large organisations that can sometimes, ultimately be out of our control. Even at a senior management level to a degree. You can influence, we can definitely lead by example, but it is the tone of the overall organisation and that leadership from the top that determines how those values play out. And I feel, especially for the financial services sector, for me, exiting just before the Royal Banking Commission process began to start, that really highlighted for me publicly behaviours and values and ways of operating that hadn't sat well for me for quite some time. So intrinsically I felt this conflict between the personal value and foundation and way of being that I held as my higher purpose against a large organization operating model. And that conflict, I actually know was one of the reasons that affected my health and well-being. Outside of working ridiculous hours, traveling long distances, not caring for myself with the self-care practices I need to keep a strong immune system and to operate in the optimal space rather than the survival space.
So
and actually thrive.
What sort of things were you neglecting in your own personal self-care while you were working in the, because I'm just thinking of our listeners some of what you've experienced personally and specifically may help people go, oh yeah, I see I'm actually doing that as well. And potentially we can work through with you some avenues because you've experienced it and you've navigated through it. So what were some of the things that were highlights? What were you noticing? What were some of the symptoms that you were experiencing of this, misalignment with the values and, potentially leading yourself to burnout?
Yeah, absolutely. I would probably touch on about 5 things that for me were self-care areas that slip quite easily when we're under pressure, when we are often maybe held to timelines and demands that are out of our control. Working for myself now, obviously I experience demands and timelines, but within a frame of what I'm accepting and creating is healthy for me. So one of the first areas was the actual sort of care from a nutrition perspective. So when you're on the go, when you're working long hours every week, every day, it's not always possible to prioritize nutrition, not without a lot of planning and a lot of, and also some investment to non-negotiate on that nutrition angle. And, especially if you're flying in and out, airports don't have particularly nutritious food. And so, yeah, you do need to be prepared. And I found myself, sometimes able to prioritize nutrition, but I would slip out of that pattern and then it would really impact me. And so when the nutrition slips, then it's reliance on, sugary foods or caffeine, things that stimulate, that are not giving me any type of nutritional support. And in effect, also not supporting my mental health or managing of stress. So that was a major area. The second area was the non-negotiable around self-care. And by self-care, I mean things like not negotiating on getting that massage once a week, on, making sure that I had the time during the weekend to go and be in nature and to receive that recharge of my personal energy, my bioelectric field, by being in nature. So just those aspects, I think, were the self-care, areas for me. Coming to the weekend, not having a lot of time, only having those sort of 2 days off and possibly catching up on work over the weekends often as well. It meant that, that weekend time was sometimes busier than during the week. And it didn't actually give me downtime. And by downtime, I mean rest. And I think what we miss so much and we lose in today's modern life is that concept of rest. Nobody rests anymore. It's either, I'm on or I'm off, and off is exhausted in bed, unconscious.
Yeah.
So that was the second area. Yeah.
I agree. I'm seeing that a lot with, and I think right now it's, for some people, they're noticing that not having to commute to work and being in lockdown, that they're getting a little bit more rest than what they normally would. And I'd be really curious to see how they're noticing it affecting them physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally as well. So can you unpack for us a little bit more around rest? So what would you define rest as? Because people are going to think sleep is rest. What's
Yeah,
the difference?
that's a really important point, and something that I come across with quite a few of my clients, especially corporates, but also those of my clients who are, I guess, moving through mental health challenges. And both those groups have lost the capacity to rest. And by rest, to your point, I mean the ability to relax into a state where your physical body is at complete ease and your mind is in a state of calm. You might still be thinking, you might still be, going on however you go on in your own brain, but you're not stuck in thought loops. We're not stressing about what we need to do next or what we've forgotten to do, or ruminating over work matters that, ultimately we should have the capacity or can have the capacity to switch off from. And when the body truly rests, the nervous system comes into balance. So you're no longer spiking through your, sympathetic activity-based side of your nervous system, and you're not so far into your parasympathetic that you're asleep. You are actually in the center of balance between the two.
Yeah, beautiful. So I know that there's a really great practice, and we've spoken about this, I think, in one of our conversations, when I said, I need to get you on my podcast. We're actually speaking about the practice of yoga nidra. So would yoga nidra be a really good tool to help people move into that restful state? Because before I say anything else, because you're more of an expert on yoga nidra. So could you explain a little bit about what yoga nidra is? Because for those listening, it's not yoga poses. So
yes, yeah.
Could you explain a little bit about that and the benefits?
Yeah, okay, sorry, Georgia, there was a bit of delay. Can you say that last bit again?
Yeah, I was going to say, could you share with everyone what it is and, how they potentially can use it as a tool?
Oh, sure. And some of the benefits, is that what you also, yeah, great.
Thank you. You did hear some, which is great.
Just a little bit, yeah. For me, yoga nidra has been an amazing experience as a practice, as a regular commitment. In my life, I was introduced to it initially whilst I was recovering from a chronic illness, so from Lyme's and also adrenal fatigue and the impact of mental health from the Lyme's disease. It was a total game changer for me in helping me rebuild my mental capacity, actually relearning, so reteaching my body to understand rest and to come back into balance, as my nervous system was just in fight flight continuously, not able to remember how to come back. So yeah, it's pretty amazing. It is a meditation practice. It is quite an ancient meditation practice, up to 5,000 years old. Some of the texts go back. But nowadays, in the modern application, it's known more as integrative restoration or conscious resting, where we basically guide the mind and body into the same levels of brainwave activity as when you're sleeping whilst you're conscious. And so because you're conscious through that process of repatterning the brain and the body, almost resyncing the nervous system and the neurological systems, so that from a brain capacity, you're firing more effectively. And also from a brain wave perspective, you're moving through the ranges of brain wave in a healthier manner. That's a bit of neuroscience, which I get really interested in, go down the rabbit hole.
Same, we could talk about that. That could be a whole nother episode right there on brain waves.
Another one. But ultimately, the purpose of yoga nidra is to realize the self beyond the mind, from what the yogic sages applied it as. So it's an ancient psychological method, which actually activates not only from a physical perspective, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually as well. And I like to call on one of my teachers, who is Kamini Desai, the daughter of Amrit Desai. He was responsible for bringing Yoga Nidra to the West. He was the first yogi from India back in the 1960s that brought this technology to us. And they like to describe it as the practice helps you to rest on the ocean floor of your being. And I just love that description, because it's actually bringing us back to the core of who we are, which is not all the material things around us, but the spiritual being having a human experience resting on the ocean floor of our being.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. That's such a lovely analogy or metaphor. So in relation to Yoga Nidra, if somebody's feeling a little stressed out right now or feeling a little bit burnt out with the extra tasks that they have at the moment, working from home, teaching from home, whatever it might be, would you suggest Yoga Nidra as a tool, if they can find time, to practice to help them get a little bit more stability back and a little bit more coherence and harmony?
Yeah, sure. Look, I would recommend Yoga Nidra for everybody, actually. But definitely if you're in a situation where right now you're experiencing perhaps levels of anxiety that just don't seem to go away, that sense of apprehension regarding all the uncertainty of what's unfolding and what we return back into and how the economic environment plays out. I mean, there's so many questions we're all working through and managing an overload of information about every day. So it helps to, I guess, slow down that frame of reference for us where we can drop into deeper states of relaxation. And whilst we're in that deeper state of relaxation, we give ourselves the ultimate pause. And it's a pause that is on all levels. So it just helps us to kind of press the reset button. That's how I feel. Every time I come out of Yoga Nidra, I feel like I've pressed that reset button.
Yeah.
And I'm just back into that state of present moment experience. Rather than being sort of fragmented and caught up and distracted, I'm back into the center of that present moment experience.
Yeah. I want to add something there, because what you're saying and the way that you're delivering it for some people might sound, oh, this is really esoteric, or this is really spiritual practice. And I just want to add on top of that, Dr. Andrew Huberman out of Stanford University, he's the neuroscientist there. He is the biggest fan and advocate for Yoga Nidra. For exactly the reasons you're saying, to be able to restore yourself and bring yourself back to center, but also relax on every single level. So it's not just the yogis of India in the past, but science is actually now verifying what they have been teaching, that this actually does relax and rejuvenate the body in its entirety. So for somebody who wants to practice it, where would they go? Do you have Yoga Nidra classes? Do you have online access to any sort of Yoga Nidra, or is there another person you can refer them to if they want to just find a guided Yoga Nidra meditation?
Yeah, absolutely. So from that sense of what you're referencing there about the neuroscience, to be honest, there is so much evidence now from a neuroscience perspective. And Richard Miller, who also knows Huberman, and I follow him as well, there's been some great studies done, not just with, for example, military veterans, around how to rewire the brain once you've been through perhaps traumatic experience or challenge or adversity, and reset a new operating baseline of resilience, but also for workplace stress, for workers, particularly in the health industries, around counselling, DV, and some of those other unfortunate scenarios. And for example, first responders, there's a lot of evidence-based practice and research coming out now around how Yoga Nidra as a technology, as a methodology, is in some areas more effective than hypnosis, but on that same level of therapeutic benefit, in terms of providing transformative shifts from the body and mind, and accessing that ability to balance the left and right brain. So yeah, really amazing. There's studies that actually show that the prefrontal cortex can be directly affected by a certain number of yoga nidra sessions. So for those looking for that optimal brain performance, it's fantastic.
So where would they find a resource to be able to use that?
To use it, yeah, sure. I've recorded some yoga nidra meditations. There's one currently available publicly on Insight Timer under Insight Timer /Resilient One. So any of the listeners can go to Resilient Timer /Resilient One online. It is a meditation app that's a free meditation app. You do have to sign up with your email and a few other personal particulars, but you can access the meditations online. There's various other yoga nidra meditations online. They're offered for free as well, not just mine. So you have a pick of several different teachers and different locations around the world that the teachers come from. From a yoga nidra perspective, though, the ideal is to actually have or experience it directly. So recordings are amazing, and I use recordings personally every day. But there is a definite level of difference between the recording and being guided by a facilitator. Just like many things in life, you know, we are bioelectric beings, so that energetic transmission that occurs through the in-person engagement provides a greater level of access. So I also run yoga nidra classes online through my House of Yoga online sanctuary, which is basically a virtual studio for meditation, yoga, and similar practices. We are hoping to launch a corporate yoga nidra series soon. So we're just currently in the throes of developing that, and it's actually called Better Sleep School, and that'll be launching at the end of March 2020 on the resilientoneglobal.com website.
Wow, exciting. And it's so good to notice that there's so many different tools there. So there's the recording on Insight Timer, and then coming up there'll also be the guided live sessions as well, which is awesome. Now, yeah. I haven't done it religiously. I have done it a number of times, and I really noticed a big difference. And I've done it through recordings. So I recommend it, only having done it a few times. And now listening to you, I'm thinking maybe it should go into my daily practices. So thanks for the little nudge there, Amy. Yeah. So speaking about the things that you do, so you mentioned that you do, obviously yoga nidra is a practice that you do on a regular basis. What are your not negotiable wellbeing practices that you know that if you maintain these allow you to manage that optimal state for really long periods of time, and if you get thrown off, you bounce back really quickly, and it's almost innate. The bounce back is innate. What are some of the things you do?
Yeah, amazing. They were actually the other 3 of my 5 wellness priorities that we were referring to earlier. So, I mean, the first 2 was like the values alignment, that internal piece, and the second was self-care. And that was, you know, marking out time for myself to get a massage. There was the nutritional aspect as well of that. So for me, the other 3 things that I do that are non-negotiables are really centered around physical practices that I know from a science and medical perspective directly impact my nervous system, my neurological functioning, and also my energetic capacity. So I like to work with my clients around intelligent energy management, and we do quite a bit of work with leaders around this as well. And that is, what are the things that can really, I guess, give you the leg up to up-level you into that optimal performance zone where it's moment by moment streaming of presence, and makes it easier when you fall off to get back on. So one for me is definitely yoga nidra. It is honestly the biggest secret of not only transformational access into flow, but also a sense of life mastery. So, you know, there's different levels of yoga nidra that we work through with clients that can actually begin to plant the intentions of change or performance or realization in terms of accessing what we desire using the 6 tools of Yoga Nidra. So there's, you know, it's the tip of the iceberg really, I guess is what I'm saying. So I use that quite actively on a number of levels, and it's completely changed my performance, but also my ability to enjoy life to the fullest. It just has turned around that for me. So I really would recommend that. The second one is myofascial release therapy. And it's an area that's becoming more and more known about. It is quite big in the States. It's becoming more known here in Australia. Some people know it as like rolling on a foam roller. But the studies I did with myofascial release therapy was actually working with the myofascia, which also houses the, you know, the meridians and other important energetic aspects of the body. It's working with it in a way that ensures that whatever we store from stress, tension, or experience, including chaos, crisis, and challenge, it doesn't actually stagnate within. It shifts and it moves on a regular basis. So I do that practice a lot, and I also work with my clients a lot in that space as well. And the final one for me is actually nature. It is unequivocally nature, and really they all come under the banner of well-being and self-care. But personally for me, nature is a big trigger to greater states of calm and better resilience.
Yeah. So I'm just going to confirm and sort of relay back to you what I've heard. So first of all is ensuring that what you do is aligned to your deeper values. Yeah. Then there's also absolutely ensuring that the fuel you put into your body, so your nutrition is a good match for you and your physical body. So everyone's going to be different. So you have daily nutritional practices and food that you eat that you know is going to nurture and nourish you and, you know, not put you out of flow. Then there's the yoga nidra, which is more of the relaxation. How often do you do yoga nidra?
I do it every day, but I have a commitment at the moment to do 2 to 3 in-person sessions, online facilitated in-person sessions a week. And
so for you personally,
I notice
your personal practice is daily?
Yes.
Okay.
So and there's various lengths.
Okay, beautiful. So, and we've got a little delay.
Yeah, we do.
So the yoga nidra, and then I've forgotten what the last one was. You do yoga as well. The
myofascial release.
Myofascial release. So rolling. So how often do you do that personally?
Daily. I do that daily. Well. Yeah.
All right. So for anyone out there listening who's going, I don't know how to start with my well-being, I don't know how to get myself into flow, potentially experiment with some of the things Amy does. So I can concur. I do most of what you do as well every day. So, you know, I have yoga every day. I have rolling every day. I do my best to eat good food, says she, who had just had 3 pieces of toast before this podcast interview, which is not normal. I don't normally eat a lot of bread. So and also being really closely aligned with my values and ensuring that when I take on work, because I work for myself as well, that there is an alignment to my deeper values and what I believe my deeper purpose is. So I find that really helpful too. So as we finish up today, a couple more questions. One is, what's your main focus now and why are you choosing to focus on that?
My main focus, I think we touched on at the beginning, and that was building resilience and also supporting us as a whole, as a collective, to be in peace and harmony through supporting individuals to align with that complete purpose or that true purpose. So that's really, for me, it boils down to trust. And the more trust that we have about ourselves and who we are and how we express in the world around us, greater trust do we have with people in our environment, in our community, and ultimately that leads to, you know, harmony of the planet.
Yeah, beautiful. So I've got a final question, which is a bit of a two-pronged question. So
Yeah.
I want you to think back. You said before that you're 43. So in your 43 years on the planet this time round, what do you think's been your greatest lesson to date so far? And the second part of the question is, what sort of advice would you give our listeners in any aspect of what you've learned in your life? So greatest lesson and advice.
My greatest lesson has been to embrace flow. That has been my greatest lesson. And when I say embrace flow, I mean like all of it. So flow in my own connection with who I am and my own sense of self, flow in my relationships, flow in my community and my environment, flow in my work, and flow in the quantum potential of what we have and what we are and what we experience. When I have really rested back into flow, and I say rested back because flow is not a doing state, it's a being state. The magic of life unfolds, and what I have and what I need is there. When I am trying to do flow or, you know, making flow a destination, then I find myself needing to navigate hurdles and obstacles, and it's a very different experience. Certainly not a flow-like experience. The older that I become, the more I realize that in order to do, I need to be.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So if you were to summarize all that, because it sounds like there's a little bit of advice in there or recommendations. I don't like giving advice, but you know, a bit of recommendations from your journey. What would you pass on to our listeners as a parting gift?
For everyone listening in, I just want to say, especially at this time, even myself, I've struggled with that permission to be in a state of non-doing, which is really a state of being. You know, rather than thinking, okay, what do I need to organize around the house? What do I need to get prepared for the next 3 months? Or, you know, how do I ensure that I can survive this? Or on the flip side of that, what do I need to do to thrive? You know, all of that is activity based. And that is awesome, because action is what we understand drives our results. But above that, the ability to act comes from the capacity to be. And so, yeah, just take the time to rest, to do your meditation, your Nidra practice, maybe walk the dog, maybe sit in the sun. Whatever for you takes you to that place of stillness, that's where the power is for all of us. So I really encourage everyone listening in to tap into that inner sense of stillness, or that center of being. However you do that, ensuring that you scaffold your life so that's a non-negotiable, it will truly change not just the experience of life, but that level of resilience, that operational set point that we all have within, that we either consciously or unconsciously move from every day.
Beautiful. I was just sitting back listening to that going, oh, it just sounds so lovely. So thank you so much, Amy, for your time today. And if people would like to reach out to you, I think you mentioned before that they can grab your free meditation on Insight Timer. Is the best way to reach you on your website, social media? Where can they find you?
Absolutely. Insight Timer for the meditation, Insight Timer /Resilient1. Our website, resilientoneglobal.com, you can connect with us there. There's all of our socials. You can also reach out to me at houseofyogin.com, also on Facebook and Instagram as well.
Thank you so much. And I do highly encourage people to reach out and follow Amy on your socials if you're a social butterfly, because yeah, she's got some amazing images and information and events that she posts on there. So you make sure you jump on board. So thank you so much, Amy. As always, it's an absolute pleasure and delight chatting to you. And hopefully, you never know, we may have to do this again and go down another rabbit hole.
Oh, look, it's been an absolute honour to be on the Ellis In Wunderland podcast, and I love the Wonderland metaphor. It's certainly, very relevant, I think, for all of us to see and to experience and to view life as a wonderland and all the rabbit holes that it has. So thank you, Georgia, for hosting and for asking me some wonderful questions to deep dive into.
Thanks, Amy.
Today is turning into the most curious adventure I've ever had.